Record. Okay. So going back, so ijma is the consensus of the companions. Then the fourth, that's why ijma became the third source of Islamic law. As a matter of fact, the juridical thought will be based on consensus. The four schools of thought and the Jafari also for the Shah are all based on the consensus of the ulamas of that particular school, of that particular juridical school. So consensus is very much used in the development of that school of thought. And then the fourth one that became also this particular period is what we call the Qiyas. Qiyas means analogy, the beginning. This is the beginning of comparison of similar cases that they need to observe, and they have to what we call make an inventory of all the different cases decided by the prophet, and perhaps this new case will be similar to the case developed and decided by the prophet. And because they are very similar, so this analogy is kia. So this will be, at least in the modern parlance, this will be called the jurisprudence or the precedent, but this time the precedent of the prophet, what he did, what they heard, you see, how he acted in this particular issue when confronted with this particular issue. So that will be very important. So there are now four. As I said, the two will occupy preeminent positions in Islamic law, and doing also exegesis of the Islamic law, they immediately resort first to the first two, what the Quran said, what the Prophet did, and what he said. Only later on, when it is not clear, when it is not explicitly said in the Quran, and there was no decision by the Prophet himself that they will go to ijma, and that is the consensus of the people who are there, the learned people in Islam that are present in that particular community facing this particular issue. And then what you call later on with the development of science and the development of all the records, you see, wherein they inventory the different decisions, hence you rely on precedent and the jurisprudence, and that will be on analogy. So this case will be similar to the case decided by the Prophet or decided later on by the companion of the Prophet. So you make what you call inventory of all these decisions, of all this ruling, and then you compare this particular case vis-a-vis the ruling of the companions or the ruling of the Prophet himself. So more or less that will be very, very important, because as you know very well now, we are moving to what we call the impact of the of Byzantine and the impact of Iran, of the Persian Empire. As I said in the beginning, it was only the Peninsula of Arabia. The second will be the Peninsula of Arabia, but there will be some impact already because they already not actually conquered, they are expanding. They're expanding to North Africa, including Egypt. That's part of the whole Byzantine Empire. They were expanded to Palestine, including Syria, and later on to Iraq. Iraq will be belonging to the Persian Empire, but Syria, including Palestine, will belong to the Byzantine Empire. So they're moving towards this direction, and you cannot help but be influenced by the permanent that were there in these civilizations that are incorporated into the Islamic Empire. As a matter of fact, as I said, because as we move now to what we call the third period, and this will be the scientific period, and this will be already wherein the whole thing moved from Medina to Damascus and later on to Baghdad. So this will be very important because the fundamentalists today, including the people who are so-called terrorists, the ISIS, including Al-Qaeda or all this movement now, they will go back to the Medinan period. But as I said, 661, the whole center moved from Medina to Damascus, and this will be the period of the, at least described in the development of law, as the scientific period because the beginning of the Enlightenment, and it will be reaching its zenith during the time of the Abbasid and later on until the Ottoman Empire. What is important is that now they are using instrument in terms of interpreting the Quran, the text. What will be the particular context of this precept? Why this particular precept was given? Perhaps in the interpretation of the Bible, if you look at the New Testament, if you compare it with the interpretation of the New Testament, they'll go to, of course, the German invented all this. You see, the Leben, what were the realities, the life in the particular community in Medina, in Makkah, that prompted this particular precept by the Prophet, you see. So that means you're beginning the use of reason, and this is now what we call the Enlightenment. So Islam moved to Enlightenment about, say, 9 centuries before the Enlightenment of the Western world, you see. So this will be very important to take note, you see. From 661, as they move out of Medina towards Damascus and later on towards Iraq, and later on towards India also, because the Mughal also will be part of the whole Islamic empire. So you have the 3 major civilizations that have been incorporated and into the whole empire, and the input of these civilizations were used and utilized in the interpretations of the Quran, in the interpretation of the life and deeds of the Prophet, and in the interpretations of the ruling of the companions. So this will be the beginning of Enlightenment. So it becomes more complicated. So always the use of reason will be always what we call complicated. It is for this reason that the major dynamics in this particular scientific period will be between the traditionalists, because they will be the heir of Medina and they will always emphasize the traditions, you see. And then on the other pole will be the rationalists, the use of reason, the rationalists. We have to use, the word now used is ijtihad, the use of reason in the interpretation of the particular text. I don't know if you do that in the interpretation of the law, in the Philippine law. That's called hermeneutics now, hermeneutics of the law. Normally you enter to the intention, why this particular law was given, the context. It's not only the word, the literal word of the law, but the spirit of the law. So when you enter into the spirit of the law, then you use the word reason, you see. But of course, in other traditions, you use also prayer, or the spirit, the discernment of the spirit. But what I'm saying to you is that there are 2 poles that were colliding during the scientific period. The traditionalists that will go to what was decided, what was handed over, and what will be the tradition. And on the other pole will be the use of reason. And it is no accident that this particular period also was the beginning of philosophy. See, in the whole development of the Islamic thought, you have reason now, the use of reason, and for the use of reason, you have to have a philosophy. And if you use philosophy, of course, you have to rely on the Greek, and the Greek will be the heirs of the Greek philosophy with the Byzantine Empire. So that's why the reason it was no accident that Plato went through, because it was all forgotten by the Western world. It was reintroduced into the Western world through the Arab Empire, because they translated everything into Arabic. So all the Greek philosophies, particularly Plato and Aristotle, will have a major role in the understanding of the Quran, understanding of tradition, and understanding of the law. And similarly also during the time of the Abbasid, now the other major influence will be that of the Persian Empire. So this will be the whole what we call period of enlightenment, the beginning of enlightenment. So when the Muslims cite, look, the first philosophers, you see, will be the Arabs. Actually, they will be the conquered Arabs centered in Damascus and later on centered in Iraq. And they will say, look, the first astronomers, they were all Arabs, the Muslims. Yeah, of course, they're coming again from the conquered land, coming from the Umayyad, because they adopted also the old practices of Greece, the old and civilizations. That is, you see, that was Greece. That will be astronomy. And they will say, the first lawyers, you see, the jurisconsult will be the Muslims. Yes. You know why? Because all the Roman tradition, which is based on law, again, forgotten by the Western world because they entered into the medieval or dark period, they were also codified and then handed over the whole Justinian legislation, the whole Byzantine, and Islam will be the heir of this. And then that will be part and parcel of the Umayyad Empire. So, as I said, they absorb. It's like what we call sponge, you see. They absorb the knowledge of the conquered people, particularly the Byzantine, and that will be the Roman Empire. And this is no accident. That's why they excel in law, they excel in philosophy, they excelled also the Kalam, which is theology, and will be the strong point also of Rome. So they excelled also in theology. So this will be the beginning, as I said, of the Enlightenment and the interpretation and scientific interpretation. No longer interpretation based on what they see, on what they feel, on what they observe, but this will be now what we call interpretation based on reason. So you see the big difference between the traditional mode and then the rationalist mode. The entry of the rationalist mode will be as they expanded, the empire expanded, and as they moved from Medina to Damascus. It is for this reason also that many people say that laws, I suppose, I don't know, you're all lawyers, laws are not neutral, you see. You look at the geography of where this law was born and look at the situations, you see, where this law emanated, and only then that you'll be able to understand the meaning of that law. So the traditionalists will interpret by simply repeating the precedent, but the rationalists will use reason, comparison, and later on consensus on the meaning of this particular law when they apply it to the cases that confront them at that particular period. So that will be very, very important because this will be also the beginning, as I said, the beginning of the juridical school of thought. So the beginning. And this will be in the Sunni, the beginning of that, and later on will be consolidated. So, and of course, 2 also in the Shia tradition, but that is the 12th and the 6th or the 7th, depending on which one they recognize as their imam or the supreme leader, like similar to Ayatollah Khomeini. So the supreme leader, the lawgiver, the interpreter, the imam. So that will be in the Shia tradition. But for the Sunni, this will be the beginning of the development of the 4 juridical thought, later on school of thought in the Islamic law. So that will be very, very important. There are differences in the development of this school of thought for the simple reason of geography and the simple reason also of different instruments that they use in the interpretation of the law. What simply I would like to say is that you cannot escape from the influence, not necessarily influence, but impact of the place and impact of the cultures and civilizations, you see, where you are in. So, and particularly also on the particular instrument that they use in terms of reason. So, as I said, philosophy already played a major role in as they moved to the Umayyad Caliphate. Similarly, also theology. So this is very important because during the time of Taqlid, it will be the rejection of philosophy, the rejection of Kalam, and going back to the tradition, you see. So it's good to know and locate the different realities, context, you see, in terms of the development of the Islamic law, because they vary, okay? So do you follow more or less? I don't know if I'm speaking, I don't know. Do you understand me or you don't understand me?
Yes, Father, we understand.
Okay, okay. So we go now to what we call the, actually, okay, part and parcels I've said of this third period, the scientific period, will be the development of the juridical thought. The four accepted or called Orthodox school of thought in Arabic is called madhab. Madahib is the plural of madhab, that is school. They're all accepted as Orthodox. So madahib, when you refer to the four schools. If you refer to one school, it will be madhab. So the oldest will be that of Imam. Imam is the leader. Normally it's a title, but now it's called as a prayer leader, but it is what we call a title, Imam Abu Hanifa. So this will be very, very important development in the growth of Islamic law, because this time around, you see, he adopted at that particular school, adopted what is now known as the theory of istiqsan. In English, that will be juristic preference. I suppose this is used by the Supreme Court, the preference. There are several options, you see. There are several cases. So which one they prefer among all the cases settled, you see? So the preference. Normally, the preference will be in favor, you see, of the aggrieved, in favor of the particular case that will be looking for justice. So the preference will be on that. So that will be the juristic preference. What will do justice? What will do good? So there are several cases that they confront, and there are different decisions. And these decisions you compare, and you see what will be the best decision to serve justice to this particular litigant. I don't know, Judge Kada, is that being used still by your court? What will be your preference? What will be the price of this particular judge of the RTC? This will be good. Though there are many cases decided that are similar, and there are many decisions, but you use the best decision so far, and that will be what we call the juristic preference. Is that being practiced in the court still? Judge Cardenas.
General Father is social justice.
What serves
Just
as a justice? Okay.
just like the Quran is social justice.
Okay. But what I'm trying to explain that there are several cases, there are several decisions, and all of them are good. But these decisions, because they are similar, or perhaps there are many, sometimes they are varied. So the judge, the Qadi, will choose if you belong to the madhab of Abu Hanifa, the Qadi, the judge, will choose the decision that was there that will serve the best, you see, this particular case, that will render, so suggested that will render justice to the aggrieved. So that is what we call the preference, the juristic. All of them are good, all of them are there, but there are variations. But you use that particular variation of the decision already there because it is what we call preferred. So based on the preferred, and the preferred will be what will be the best, you see, for this particular litigant or for this particular case. So, okay. So that will be the strong point of this particular school, particularly in the use of consensus as well as the use of qiyas, analogy, that you use what we call the juristic preference, iktisan in Arabic. Okay. And that is the first one, that is Abu Hanifa. So this will be the beginning of the study of jurisprudence, because you have to know the different decisions, the different fatwas. So jurisprudence is that, the different rulings, you see, the evolution of the ruling. So that's the beginning of the jurisprudence in Islamic law. So, okay. The second one will be a pioneering work of Imam Shafi. This will be very, very important because we in Southeast Asia follow the madhab of Imam Shafi, you know. Imam Shafi is very particular in writing all these decisions and compiling them into a book, and then this becomes the reference, you see. Perhaps you will understand it now. Something similar to what we call the Supreme Court rulings, diba? You refer to that volumes, the different rulings of the Supreme Court. Iskra, no? Something iskra. So Imam Shafi proposed that similar to iskra, no? Wherein you codified or you put together all these rulings, a fatwa, it becomes a reference to the Qadi, to the judge. So that when there be a new case that he confronts, he will look at this volume, the book, and it was already decided. And most lawyers, of course, do that, okay? So, as I said, the first one will be juristic preference. If you go to describe, there are several also ruling, you know, which is the best one, which is preferred one. And then now, very important is the beginning really of the science of jurisprudence, because Imam Shafi proposed the writing of the different rulings in many cases, and then coming up with a volume. So it will be what we call your reference. So as I said, it will be akin to your skra. So any kind of ruling that you do, you refer to the skra, isn't it? To the Supreme Court ruling. That becomes what we call the jurisprudence on the subject. So Imam Shafi will be the proponent of that particular school. Yes, tradition, but it's the scientific collation and editions of different ruling. So you have what we call the real beginning of the Islamic jurisprudence. The third madhab will be that of Imam Malik. There's another title, most probably if you look at that, the title used for these people, one is Imam. When you say Imam, will be more religious because he have his own school, and his stature will be that of akin to mysticism. Imam is very religious, so the title uses Imam. In the Shia tradition, of course, the Imam is a title for the leader of the community. And in our contemporary period, the Imam is the one who lead, the people who lead in prayer. They are called Imam. Why they are called Imam? It came from the Arabic word of Imama, that is before. The prayer leader is an Imam because he's the person who stands before the community. And the community just imitates, you see, the prayer leader, what he does, they do. So it's most probably in certain sense, when you say Imam Hanifa, Imam Shafi, that you will follow what they do. They will follow what they say, you see. They're the Imam, they're before the community, which is important, you see. So the title is very important also in terms of doing a scientific study of the law and study of this madhab. So these schools are led by holy men and learned men, you see, holy and learned. That will be good, characteristic of judges, diba? And of course, if you are holy, you're supposed to be objective. You're God. Tama mo ba, Judge Cardenas? So the two characteristics of the judges during this particular period will be holy men. Wala pang women po noon. So sorry na lang yung mga attorney nating women. Holy men and learned. You see, learned. That means they really studied the Quran. They studied the deeds of the Prophet. And they studied also the different rulings of these particular cases. So the two characteristics will be holiness and learning, wisdom and sanctity. Tama bang karakteristiko yun, Judge Cardenas, ng isang judge?
Father, I've been
Yes.
reading the Bible. I've been reading the Bible.
Oh,
Now I'm reading the Quran.
wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
it, it's a nice discovery.
okay.
The Bible and the Quran really are the best guides
Okay.
to dispensation of justice.
Okay, the dispensation of justice. Very good. That's good. I suppose we should recommend to all justices of the Supreme Court, to judge the Holy Writ. Okay, that's good. But already at this stage, the two characteristics will be holy man and learned man. Science and holiness. So science and prayer, the combination of two. So, kasi yung secularist, later on, the secularist school will just emphasize on the learned, which is the reactions of many. Why only learned? Why only science? You see, but early on in the development of this, the growth of the Islamic law, these are the two preferred characteristics of the judges and of course of the lawyers at that particular period. The third founder, there's another title which is Hazrat. Hazrat, Wow, i-google nyo na Imam, a very good title, a religious title. Hazrat is also a very good title, and it's also a religious title, Hazrat. But Hazrat is connected to a particular family, particular blood. So Imam is not connected to blood, it's connected to what we call faith, holiness, you see, and you're not related by blood. So Imam, anyone can be an Imam. Not everyone can be a Hazrat. Because when you use the word Hazrat, there is what we call the claim of blood. The claim of blood, that means he came from apostolic traditions, the Hazrat. Either from the prophet himself or the companions of the prophet. See, that means you can claim that direct descendants of holy men. Because holiness, I don't know, some people say holiness is acquired. Some people say it's acquired and it's by birth. Tahu mama ho by birth. So, Hazrat is by birth, you see. Something similar to the Imam in the Shah tradition, only in the family of the Prophet, the Bait, the family, the house of the Prophet, you see. So Hazrat is more or less that particular title that will have a claim, the blood claim. That the blood claim shows that this will be a special people, apostolic people, and they are loyal to what we call that apostolic tradition. And Hazrat is very important. Why this is important for Imam? The two titles, he was an Hazrat and he was also an Imam. Hazrat, Imam, Malik. So the third school is Malikit. The two titles in terms of interpreting the law. And he started a new doctrine also in the interpretation of the law. If Hanifa introduced what we call the juridical preference, what is the preferred decision for this particular case. If Shafi will have what we call a jurisprudence in the compiled tradition and seeing the historical perspective of this particular law, now Malik, Imam Malik or Hazrat Imam Malik introduced a new doctrine in the growth of the Islamic thinking, and that will be the common good. So earlier, Judge Cardenas said, what is the common good? So what is the common good for this particular country? What is the common good for this particular community? What is the common good for this particular family? See, the common good. So that is very important. So this is what we call the development of public good, social good. So social justice, you see, the public good. So this is an important doctrine in the interpretation of the law, and it has been there already in Islam at the very beginning, in this third period of interpretation, the public good. As I've said often enough that they've already moved to Damascus, and they have to deal with several kinds of people. They have to deal also with the Christians, with the Jews, with the different people. Later on, they will be dealing with the Indians. They'll be dealing with all kinds of people. And the decision vis-a-vis these people are not contained in the Quran. So they have to use science, you see. And Malik, you see, Imam Malik, you see, what is the public good? What is harmony for the community? The public good. Don't rock the boat. The establishment, the public good. So that is a good doctrine, the public good. I don't know, is that being used also in Philippine jurisprudence, the public good? Anyone? The whole doctrine of the holding the public good, will that be used also?
Yes, Father. In expropriation proceedings.
Okay. Actually, I thought that the writ of kalikasan is based on public good. So because it's a new legislation by the Supreme Court, the writ of kalikasan. So, and that is public good because environment, habitat, planet will be a public good. River, public good, you see. So all the while I thought that the Supreme Court during the time of Justice Puno came about the writ of kalikasan precisely because of the whole understanding of public good. Because coastlines, alam niyo maingay aso ko ho yan, napakarami kong aso sorry no. So merong tao dyan so and they're all guard dogs, you see, they're my guards, you see. So you see all the barking. I have to get sandali lang ho. I will stop here. So public good. That is a good example actually of the writ of kalikasan, wherein you think of the, I don't know now about that white sand in Manila Bay, you see. So that's totally different. My point only is that the writ of kalikasan is one of the primary examples of thinking of public good. Because environment, river, forest, and corals are all public good. And they're generational. And unless the court intervene, you see, and you wait for the congressman, Jesus Mario Joseph, you will wait until the kingdom come. Ano? So this is a judicial action, and in line with this, what we call with Abu Malik or Hazrat Imam Malik, wherein public good is considered to be very important in the decision and the development of law, understanding law of God. For a while. Yung aso ko, ay nako. Sorry. So I have 4 big dogs, you see, around my house. So sorry. Wala na ho.
German Shepherds, Father.
And actually, 2 lab and one ho, yung isa naman ho is a combination of bulldog and dachshund. And the other one is meron kasamang pitbull. Kaya sino man duman dito, tinatawlan. They have 4 guard dogs, so see. So, yun lang ho kasama ko rito sa aking hermitage. So otherwise, I'm alone with all this. All my conferences are done through online na ho, pati classes ko at NDU also. So, nasa hermitage na ako nag-hear. Okay. But actually, we are all connected through online. So, as I said, that's a very good development, yung public good. So, it's a good. Actually, that's why gusto ko rin yung activism in the judiciary. Some people don't like activism in judiciary, no? Kasi hindi makapag-antay, no? You cannot wait, no? And that is in the whole Islamic law. activism of these different schools as they face problem will be characteristics, activism, and then hindi walang passive, activism, particularly when it comes to public good, and activism in terms of preference, and actually also activism in terms of the use of kiosks, and that is analogy. So, kayo mga abogado, at pati si judge, active. So, di ko mas sinasabi. This is very important, the public good. Okay. So, naku merong nangyari something happened in the history of Islam. So what happened, Father? Sabi nga, some people put the exact date, Ako naman just study it and then read. Baka nga totoo, Some said they marked the year 1111, The year 1111. What happened the year 1111? Many Muslims don't know what happened in the year 1111, Parang 9/11 po natin, 2001. The world is not the same anymore. So in the year 1111, the world of Islam is not the same anymore. Ano yung nangyari noon? Dito sa 9/11, yung Twin Tower, Pentagon, and a plane also somewhere in Philadelphia meant for Washington, yung terrorist attack. And consequent of that will be the conquest in Afghanistan, the regime change in Iraq, and now they want also the regime change in Syria, and regime change also in Libya. So my point, and they would like also regime change also in Iran. So that all-out war against terrorism. But anyway, we may agree or disagree with it. But my point only is that the world is never the same again because of the 9/11. So something similar also in the development of law, and the development, say for example, of the growth of juridical thought, something happened in the year 1111. Sabi na, anong nangyari yung year 1111? Actually, it marked the death of the use of reason because that was the end or the death of the great genius, a great teacher of the law by the name of Muhammad al-Ghazali. Ghazali. So he died in year 1111. He was very original in his thinking, and he really used reason, the whole enlightenment, in the interpretation of the Quran and the tradition, and in making also new legislations. He wrote books and volumes, particularly religious knowledge, and using all the scientific reasons, but he was a holy man too. So as I said, the two characteristics will be holiness, at the same time also as learned. Definitely he was learned. He really mastered the whole library of Baghdad and the library also of Damascus. And he became an itinerant missionary because he abandoned all that knowledge later. He was a professor of great standing in all Islamic schools of thought at that particular period. And he became a mystic himself, so he became an itinerant teacher. And then later on, back again to the academe, and then wrote several volumes and several commentaries. Then he died in the year 1111. So after that, no more original thinker. So I said, no more original thinker. Some people say, because everything is already said and done. Hindi man totoo yung everything is already said and done. So what happened is that following Ghazali, it was only what you call explanations, enumeration, no more use of your original thinking. So the third period is called the period of taqlid, in Arabic, taqlid. Of course, in English, this is translated nicely. That will be what we call the president, period of just relying on the president. What is the precedent, see? No longer using your reason, particularly in meeting this particular case. So that means there'll be no original thinking. It just be purely making an inventory of all the different rulings and publishing them and writing commentaries on these rulings. No more independent thinking. So they said this will be the beginning of the end of the Enlightenment, because from that time on, Islam was moving downward. It is very interesting, you see, as Islam, as I said, was 500 years earlier in terms of reaching enlightenment. So it went to its zenith in Damascus, so, and also in Baghdad rather. Then as the moment that the West was waking up from the dark period, sometime also in the 12th century or 11th century, beginning the enlightenment of the West, that was the time Islam naman moving downward. So parang nagkasalubong ko sila, no? Yung isa pababa, isa pataas. Nung una, yung dark period yung West, ano? Wala talaga. They don't even know how to read and write, ano? So only the monks preserve all these writings in the different monastery by just copying. So Islam was adopting all the sciences and the knowledge of Greece, the knowledge of Rome, the knowledge of the Persian Empire, and the knowledge of the Indian Empire. So, including our numerals. Our numerals will be a combination of Arabic and Indian numerals, you see. So, that was the zenith of the Enlightenment. But in the year 1111, it reached its peak, and then from then on, it was moving downward to the present, you see. Many people ask me, Father, bakit nag-deteriorate ang Islamic civilization? And the height of the deterioration will be in 1924, you know? So in the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. So, but actually the beginning of the collapse, it will take some time, see, from 1111 to 1924. But already they felt the onslaught of this, you see, at different times, see, wherein they could no longer adapt to modernization because they rejected philosophy. They rejected theology. That's why there's no developed kalam or theology. There was no developed Islamic philosophy because of the rejection of it. There was no developed sociology. Even Khaldun will be the father of sociology, the Tunisian Ibn Khaldun. And it's the rejection of science and knowledge, you see, beginning in 1111. So you see the opposite direction. And that was the beginning of the deterioration of the whole Islamic civilization that will culminate in the collapse of the empire. Actually, that is the coup de grace, yung collapse of the Ottoman Empire. It was already collapsed even then. Okay, so as I said, this particular period, the fourth period, will be just elaborating the comment and making commentaries of the work of the predecessors of the great masters. And as I said, physically, that will be marking it, will be the death of the great genius of Islam, Muhammad al-Ghazali. So that will be very important. Do you have any questions so far?
About Father Omar Khayyam.
Oh, nasa fifth stage na ho siya, sa fifth stage. Nasusunod. Okay. So that's good. So Omar Khayyam, okay, we'll go now. Talaga advance ka judge, ano? That will be in the fourth period, you see, but that's more of spirituality, okay. So, okay. Pala, just di kayo matinwaking Islamic spirituality. Yung ba gusto mo on spirituality, I give also lecture once a month on Islamic spirituality, the Badaleya. That's very good, interesting. Anyway, I will announce it also. Okay. Anything? So
One more, Father, please.
Yes,
Father, one more.
Go.
I would like to be enlightened about the Sunnis and the Shiites. Is it really geographical or something wrong with their tradition?
Naku, malaki pala itong tanong nyo ho eh. That will occupy one course, ano, Judge. Pero briefly saying is that it started in 662. Actually, it started much earlier than 661. But the empire was still united until 661. So, but after the death of the Prophet Ali, the last caliph of Baghdad, you have a contention, you see, the contending party that will be the governor of Damascus, that's why the start of the Umayyad, Muawiyah, the nephew of the third caliph of Islam in Medina, Caliph Osman, you see. And Muawiyah claimed that Ali will be partly responsible for the assassination of Caliph Osman. no, interesting ko, mga assassinated do yung mga leaders so ng una, no? Were assassinated. By the way, assassination is, it's good to study Islam and to know the assassination. Assassination is coming from Arabic, hasasaniya, no? So, kaya nga, nakita niyo ba yung assassin na bagong film, no? Di ba ho? Maganda ho yun. Actually, at one time, there was a great shake of all these assassins, assassinated, no, in the mountains. And that actually, what we call, parang balance sa mga dictatorial rule ng mga caliphate, ano? Lalo na kasi succession, dynasty, and everything like that. So, walang great equalizer. The equalizer will be the assassins. Kaya assassin, political ho. Ang kanilang pinapatay, ano? Yung mga presidente, mga king, mga gano'n, ano? Hindi yung mga ordinary people. Not like the terrorists now, even the ordinary people. The assassin is special order that have become actually the equalizer, particularly because they become dynastic. And assassination coming from hashish. Hashish, see, hashish is Arabic word also, that you become intoxicated because intoxication by wine is prohibited. So smoke, assassination, or by tea is very important also, that you become high, na-high ho kayo. And then because na-high kayo, you don't feel pain anymore, no? And then you're okay, ready to go. And you don't think of danger and you become assassins. Okay, but naligaw ho tayo, no? Most of them were assassinated yung first caliph, no? So, Muawiyah,
So, Father, Mamun was assassinated.
sino?
Mamun.
Pero sa Abbasid na po kayo, Mahmoud, ano? Dito muna
Al-Makmun at saka si Al-Hakim.
sa Medina ho muna ako. Talaga nagbabasa ko kayo. Pero that is in the Abbasid na ho yun. That is in the later caliphate. So, as a equalizer. So, nirkiso si Ali na nakapart doon sa conspiracy in the assassination of Osman. And because of that, he did not recognize si Ali as the leader of the community, governor of Syria, appointed by his uncle Osman. So what happened is that nagbattle the first fitra, the first division in Islam, the battle between Muawiyah, the governor of Damascus, and of course the Medina. Mananalo na ho si Ali, no? Panalo na ho siya. Mahusay man hong taktisan si Muawiyah. Nung matatalo na ho siya, ang ginawa, yung pieces of Quran, nilagay sa kanilang spear. So that in a way, yung mga Muslim na partisan of Ali, that was stopped. They asked and demanded for arbitration. Normally, dapat God determines the winner of the battle, and then the winner of the battle is the one favored by God, you see. Need not be the battle of everybody, but it can be the leader of the other side and this side, and whoever wins, you see. That's it. So, kung nakita ho nyo yung The Kingdom of Heaven, o nakita nyo yung mga films like that na The Battle of the Champions, you see? Yun na lang po maglalaban. Hindi man kailangang gera the whole army. So, the point there is that they demanded for arbitration. So, inadmit ni Caliph Ali arbitration. But during the arbitration, natalo ho si Caliph Ali sa arbitration. Tinanggap yung arbitration, natalo ka, ano pa magagawa, natalo siya. So, because ang Sunni is that ang kanilang position, the leaders of the community is decided by consensus in the community. Kung malakas ka doon sa nagko-consensus, palakasan, o kaya nabibili mo, ikaw mananalo, no? So, parang democracy na rin, no? Consensus, ano? Butuhan, ano? So, pag butuhan, limited din yung bumoboto. So, yun. So, natalo si Ali sa arbitration. And then, yung kanyang partisan, nag-separate sa kanya. They are called the partisan of Ali. They are called Shah. The Shia will be the Ali before the partisan of Ali. Sabi nila is that, why do you accept the arbitration of men? Wala po yung women noon kasi arbitration of men. You don't follow the arbitration by God, you see. God ordained you to be the caliph, you see. And that has been decided. And now you're accepting what we call the arbitration of men. Natalo ho siya. So later on, pinaborman din niya ho yung kanyang partisan. So that was the first natawag nating fitra, the division in Islam, between the partisan of Ali, who became later on Shia, and the Sunni, you see, by consensus. Sa Shia ho, ang ruler of the community is from the family of the Prophet. From the family, is by blood. So holiness and by blood. So that's why you have Ayatollah, you have Khomeini. They are not appointed by men, you see. They've been chosen, you see, by God. So Ayatollah means the sign of God. So the mullah, they are chosen by God, you see. So yung sa Sunni, they were chosen by men. They were elected by consensus. So ganon. So that's the two major divisions. But they parted their ways from 631. So they developed their own theology, their own traditions. Something similar to understand it, similar to the development of Eastern Christianity and the Western Christianity. Siguro para natin maintindihan. So the Eastern Christianity developed their own theology, their own tradition. But they're all equally apostolic. So similar also in Islam. The Shia is equally orthodox. Kaya lang ho, ibang tradition na ho yun kasi through the years na nag-separate sila, they have their own school of thought also. The use of reason, the use of traditions. So nagkahiwalay sila. By and large, that will be the difference. So, Judge Cardenas. Okay na ho ba yun?
Thank you, Father. Thank you.
Do you have any question? Then we'll call for a break muna. And then mag-alas 12 na, 30 minutes na lang, matatapos na. Diretsuhin ko na lang po, no? Para matapos na tayo. Okay? Okay, the last stage will be very important because this fifth stage will be the beginning of the 19th century to the present. So, yung taklid ho, yung imitation, yung no innovations, just yung precedent, it lasted for 9 centuries, 900 years, napakatagal ho, no? Hanggang 9th century, from 11 to 11 to 19th century or early of the 20th century. 900 years, ang tagal ho na wala hong innovation because innovation is abhor. Wala hong creativity because that is wala ho. Nireject yung philosophy, nireject yung theology, nireject yung other scientific instrument in the interpretation of the law. So talaga hong parang calcification. Naging calcified yung law. Meron din yung macalcified yung law, no? Yung literal na lang, napakahirap po noon. So no innovation. Innovation is abhor. And that existed for 900 years. Napakahaba po. Kaya towards the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, nagkaroon po ng mga thinkers, Muslim thinkers, who were educated in the West. Wow, hindi educated. Talagang Western world, nagsisira ho ng educated in the West. That means kasi ang West naman po ay nagkaroon ng Renaissance beginning the 12th century. So, as I said, that was the beginning. Ang key naman ho ng Renaissance in the West is the use of reason also, di ba? Dati kontrolado ng mga clergy. Ito ba, nandiyan si Father Anthony, magagalit sa akin. So, walang freedom of thinker. Walang creativity. Palo ka na lang, palo ko. Ano sabihin ng Pope, ano sabihin ng Bishop, ano sabihin ng Pare. So, you don't use your reason. So, kaya yun yung during the dark period. Ang part and parcel of the Renaissance is now you become independent use of reason. Itong Renaissance na ito, nag-umpisa ho noong early 1100, patuloy po hanggang ngayon, pati yung ating secular thinking, secular culture, is still part and parcel of this Renaissance. Sabi naman nila, di ba ang conclusion nitong Renaissance is the exclusion of the sacred and God in the picture naman. So the opposite, But what I'm pointing only is that that was the beginning of the use of reason. That will be the period of great creativity. That will be great, sabihin natin, understanding, sabihin natin, the discovery of sciences. And then the tool, of course, sciences become the new gods. The science is what science tells us. But coronavirus tells us that science doesn't know everything. But anyway, my point only is that that is the Renaissance of the West. So, ngayon no, itong beginning ng 20th century, these thinkers, schooled in the West, they call for a new renaissance to starting nga with Muhammad Iqbal of Pakistan to recapture the spirit of Islam. Yung mga British educated, sabihin natin sa India and Pakistan, yung subcontinent, already beginning to new interpretation. Yun naman ho sa Middle East, particularly Iraq, Syria, pati Lebanon, pati Libya, heavily influenced by the French. Sus Maria Josep, yung French, from the French Revolution yung lay, wala na yung clerical control, talagang creativity, the use of reason, the lay, the lay movement, laicism, major influence in the whole North Africa and part of the Middle East. And then yung British, dumadating na rin po sa kanyang, of course, in the 19th century, they partition naman ho yung lahat na yan. So, nag-decide na ho sila sa conference in Berlin. So, what I'm trying to tell is that all those young people, youngsters coming from the Arab world, coming from the Middle East, coming from North Africa, coming from India, subcontinent of India, coming from Southeast Asia, well educated now in this renaissance of the West. So when they go back, when they went back, they are no longer they're no longer influenced by the different madaris, you see, but they are very scientific. And then, of course, they parrot the West, they would like to have the progress and development similar to the West development. As a matter of fact, the word Young Turks, are you familiar with Young Turks, The Young Turks. Yung Young Turks is usually the progressive, the modern, you see, but they're coming from the Ottoman Empire that were educated in the West, and they saw the stagnation because of that 900 years of taqlid. So they want a new creativity and innovation, even in the understanding of the law. So they introduced new ideas, and they were called Young Turks. So, but the Young Turks has been adopted in our vocabulary. So it refers also to what we call the progressive, the liberals. Pati yung Liberal Party ho, ibang yellow band. So, di ba, yellow, they're supposed to be liberal, If it's a new idea, so you're open to this. Iba naman yung Liberal Party ho natin. I'm just saying, whole understanding ng liberal ho, na magkaroon ka ng freedom. So, yun ang ibig sabihin noon, katulad nung scientific period, the use of reason, the use of ijtihad. So that means we have to review all these fatwas, but we have to review also the concrete realities, and we should be open to innovation, bid'ah, and we should be open to creativity. And perhaps through extrapolations, we can come up with a new ruling. That means you have to broaden your understanding of your Islamic law. You have to broaden your interpretation of the Sharia. You have to broaden even the accepted madahib understanding of law. So in modern times, the legal interpretation, reasoning, follow three ways. So kaya nga ijtihad. So first, most of them were, ito kasi naging subject ko ng West, Egypt fell under the British. Most of the Muslim North Africa fell under the French. Southeast Asia and India fell under the British. Yung Middle East, combination ng French and British. Pinaghati-hati ho lahat yan nung sa Berlin Conference. So because of that, na-adapt na rin nila the Western mode of thinking when it comes to law. So they said there are three ways now, perhaps, in the interpretation of the law. And there are three ways, perhaps, in exercising our reasoning power, the ijtihad. The first one will be the statutory legislation. That means our legislation can legislate now, the statutory legislation. They are, kasi nung panahon ng taklido, they cannot legislate, So we return the power of legislation because they are also by design of God. They've been elected, you see it in the legislature, so there can be a statutory legislation. The second, also, in the whole interpretation of the law and development of law, and this opens also the creativity, is the judicial decision. Itong mga judicial decision, collective, mga fatwa, mga rulings, collective ruling, can be sources of creativity and new interpretation of law. As I said nga, yung kung public good ang ating papalo, yung writ of kalikasan is not a product of statutory legislation but judicial decisions. So that is the second in the ijtihad that the learned judges, the learned qadis, can come up, and the learned ulama can come up with the new opinions, which is a fatwa that is very important. So, yun ang important to. Yung second basis po ng creativity will be the decisions, contemporary decisions by the learned and holy judges, as you compile them. So, the creativity, see, especially with the public good. And the third very important will be scholarly writing. So, they are not judges, but scholarly writing. And this will be the juries. So, alam niyo yung founders nitong mga school of thought are not judges, They are scholars. As I said, they are learned in Islam and they are holy men. So similarly also, the key to our creativity in the interpretation of the law will be, particularly in these contemporary times, will be scholarly writings. That means we cultivate scholars, especially scholars of the law, and reintroduce again multidisciplinary. Father Rani is introducing multidisciplinary in the graduate school of law, multidisciplinary in the approach of law. You cannot approach law in one school only because that will be parang one way lang, restricted, But you introduce different disciplines in the interpretation of the law, and so that you have a broader and wider understanding of the law. So, and that will be the input of the scholars, you see, the scholars of the law, scholars in terms of philosophy, scholars in terms of language, linguistics, scholars in terms, for example, of sciences. So scholarly writings are now very important. Hence, publication is very important, you see. So even judges, even justices of the Supreme Court depend on the scholarly writings of the eminent scholars from Harvard and from Cambridge, from Princeton, or from other schools of law, yung mga mga professor lang ho sila at they've written a lot of articles. Kahit wala pang mga ruling, they trailblaze, you see, yung understanding of the law. So, ito rin yung ginagamit nyo ngayon sa pag-open. This is opening the interpretation again of the law. Open again creativity. Open again yung innovations, you see. And basically yung scholarly writings. It is for this reason that the scholars occupy a very important role, you see, not only in the interpretation of law, but also in theology, also scripture, even our traditions. Without the scholars, we go back again to the Stone Age. So that is very important. So I would like to conclude there. Baka meron kayong question. Sige, I'll leave now for question and answer. That will be for our lesson for today. Any question?
Father?
Yes.
Father, I just wanted to ask. You mentioned a while ago that imam are those learned and spiritually blessed with wisdom. Is there any formal education that can classify them as imam nowadays? So marami po tayong imam, tapos, so I'm just, Father, curious. Father, to be an imam, regardless of the education attainment, and parang 6 months or 3 months, o basta most respected ka, you will be granted with that title.
Right.
Yun ang...
Oo. Sabihin natin muna yung imam ng gobyerno, like yung imam ng PNP, no? So, mga imam ng AFP, they just undergo 6 months to 1 year training and they become imam. Totoo yun, Colonel Camarao. Pero yung imam ho ng community, dapat graduate ho sila. Graduate sila ng either ng Islamic school, either the local one, so or they graduate abroad, So para meron silang learned, napansin ko yan Napapansin ko yan kasi pati yung minsan narinig ko yung imam nyo magsalita, mag-lead ng prayer ng Arabic, pati yung kanyang Arabic Siguro dito lang na iba ho, no? So, pero yun ang requirement man ng law. Iba man yung imam ng gobyerno, imam talaga na accepted in the community. Tapos meron pang pangatlo ho, importante usually sa imam is in the traditional way, he is the prayer leader in the community. That means he's full of wisdom and pure and holiness, ano? Is recognized by the community because he also becomes the arbitrator, yung agama rule. Normally they go to him, not only for religious matters, but also for the arbitration in terms of quarrels and sometimes even tort in the community. Kaya nga coexisting yung agama court here in the south. So imam also have that. But strictly speaking, the word imam is a prayer leader, the one who stands before the community and lead the community to prayer. The word imam is imama, he who stands in prayer with the community in front of them. But as I said, different institutions have different requirements for the bestowal of the title imam. Your imam is not automatically recognized imam by the community, Colonel. No. However, if you are a graduate of a faculty, you become an alim and then you become an imam. So automatically, you are recognized. Okay, ho ba yun? Okay.
Yes, Father. Thank you po.
Okay. Other people who like to ask.
Hello, Father.
Yes, Tony Paisa. Yes.
I would like to ask if what if their fatwas or their judicial decisions, does it happen that they could be conflicting? What if there are conflicts between what if there are different legal opinions about a case? How do they resolve it when Islam does not have a central authority like the Vatican?
That's a good question. Normally, every country will have a grand mufti. Every country or every, like example now, the grand mufti of the Barm, you see? So they have a mufti. So it is not also a central leadership, but it is a authoritative opinion, okay? So there's a big difference when it is a authority or authoritative opinion. When you say authoritative opinion, that means you can disagree with it. And it does not make you a non-Muslim if you disagree. So nobody declares you to be un-Muslim if you disagree with an authoritative opinion. Okay. As you have said, they don't have central authority. Second very important distinction is that there are mufti who have different decisions. Kasi ngayon dati bago maging mufti, you have to go to the process. Some people call themselves mufti even without going through. So say for example, if someone makes a decision that it is wrong, a fatwa wrong to do suicide bombing. A concrete example now, suicide bombing. There'll be a decision of the different mufti that they say suicide bombing is haram fi Islam, haram in Islam. But meron manong mufti, like mufti ng Al-Qaeda, ang mufti ng Biayabet, mufti ng sabihin natin ng Maute, that it's part of jihad. So there are two rulings. So ang gagawin mo niyan yung sino pinapalo nila, you will tell kung sinong pinapalo mong nagbibigay ng patwa. Kung ang nagbibigay ng patwa, pinapalo mo yung okay yung suicide bombing, so nagsi-suicide bombing sila. There will be jihad. Though yung ibang majority is that is forbidden, that is haram. Kasi wala nga central authority, so you choose which one to follow. So which authoritative decision do you follow? Okay, baho yun.
Okay. Thank you, Father.
Okay, so para bang market, you choose. Grocery, hindi naman ganun. Normally, you belong to a particular school. Pati nabura na ho eh. Normally, you belong to Shopee, you belong to Hanapi, na you maintain that particular thing. Ngayon, marami na nagsulputan nung nagdi-decision. Kaya naging na hong parang supermarket, you choose. Okay. Yes, I would like to ask.
Thank you, Father.
Other question lang. I have two questions.
Yes, go ahead. That is Attorney Reyes, ano?
Attorney Valera.
Attorney Valera, okay.
My first question, Father, is meron ba silang dissenting opinions din? Recorded din ba ho yun?
Yes, oo. Napakarami ho. Kasi sabi ko nga ngayon, napakaraming mufti ho. At napakarami ngayon nagkiklaim na nagbibigay ng patwa. Oo. Because of that, iba ang kanilang ruling. Ano? Kaya ngayon, nagdi-determine ngayon sino ang pinapalo mong, sino ang yung imam, sino ang yung mufti. Yung gano'n na ho. Ano? Like example, you follow Al-Qaeda, you follow the Al-Qaeda line. Can you just imagine, ang Al-Qaeda, ang pinapalo nila, kung si Osama bin Laden is not trained in the law. He's an engineer. Kaya nga, isa muhandis. No? Ang kanyang, ngayon, nagro-ruling ngayon. Nung namatay na si bin Laden, si Sarkawi, no? Hindi, Az-Zawahiri pala, Az-Zawahiri. Sino si Az-Zawahiri? He's a surgeon, medical surgeon, ano? So he was not also trained in the law, not trained in the tradition. But sila ho, nagbibigay ng ruling, ano? Because they train themselves. Hindi na sila certified. Wala naman nagbibigay ng certification. So, merong mga, of course, sasabihin nila, kailangan yung normally before, ano pang sinasabi ng Al-Azhar? Al-Azhar is the premier school, sabihin natin, ng Islam that is based in Cairo. Kanya very authoritative, you know, no? So, anong sinasabi ng Mufti of Al-Azhar? Ano sinasabi ng mga ulama sa Al-Azhar? Yung iba namang Wahhabi, ano sinasabi ng Mufti ng Saudi Arabia, no? Kasi marami na na-influence ng Saudi Arabia sa Philippines because of petrodollar. Ano mas sinasabi ng imam ng sabihin natin ng Jordan, because Jordan mayroong claim to be the protector of the family of the prophet. Diba? They are loyal to the imam of Amman. No? So, yung mga ganun, no? Kaya nagkakaroon ng mga differences na mga opinion depending on the schools that you follow. Okay ho ba yun? Atty. Barela.
Yes, Father. May second question, Father, is yung
Yes.
ano pagkakaiba nung caliph sa emir sa sultan?
Okay. Caliph is the lieutenant of the prophet, so he's a religious leader, at the same time also as a secular leader. Normally, everything is done in his name, the caliph, you know. But merong development during the time of the Ottoman, kasi Ottoman na ho sila, no? During the Ottoman Empire, na ang power moved from caliph to the sultan. So, kayong caliph po naging religious na lang ho. Parang religious saka yung for the Muslim community, but the secular affairs will be handled by the sultan. So, kaya tuloy na develop ng whole understanding ng sultan starting from the Ottoman hanggang na rin sabihin natin sa atin, no, Philippines, Sultanate, ano? Ganon din no, sa Malaysia, Sultanate, even in Indonesia, Sultanate. This will be flowing from the development of the Sultanate government structure, adapting it from the Ottoman, starting from the Ottoman. Okay ho ba yun? That will be beginning the 14th century. Okay. Pero sabi niyo, meron pang vizier. Ano? Vizier is the prime minister. Normally kasi nung beginning ho ng Umayyad tsaka ng Abbasid, they have a vizier. Vizier ho kasi yung galing ho sa disyerto itong mga Umayyad na ito. No? So they don't know the affairs of men and the affairs of the world. So that's why they adopted the vizier. Parang vizier, parang prime minister ho. Yun ho. Pero responsible and accountable to the caliph. Okay ho yun. So parang administrator.
Yung Emirates po, Father, kasi di ba yung sa, halimbawa, yung Emirates tapos Sultanate sa caliph.
Emirate ho. Ang emir is prince. Kasi emir ho is a small country ho. Oo. Samantalang yung gano, emirate, tama ho, emir. Emir is a prince o kaya leader also. Commonly used na ho yan depending on the size, ano. While Saudi Arabia use king, ano, king of Saudi Arabia, king of Jordan. While doong maliliit na emirate, maliliit lang kasi ma-package na kaya emir lang ho siya. Pero he has the same power as the king in their own geography. Okay. Sometimes people are called sultan. Okay. The leader ho. Oo. Okay ho ba yun?
Thank you, Father.
Oo. Yes. Who would like to ask more questions?
Father, just a clarification.
Yes.
Regarding us on your lecture on schools of Islamic law, yung 4 schools po. Ang question ko lang po is, are the 2 sects, the Sunni and the Shia Muslims, do they adhere to these schools of Islamic law, or do they have a separate schools of Islamic law?
The Shia will have a separate Islamic law, a school of Islamic law, juridical thought. Only the 4 are belonging to the Sunni.
Sunni.
Oh.
Thank you, Father.
Okay. Yes. But it's good to know also that in the old practice, you don't move from one school to another school. As in Christianity, you don't move from Eastern Christianity to Western Christianity or Western Christianity to Eastern Christianity. Kaya minsan natatawa ko rito ngayon sa mga ibang pare na Western Christianity, gusto-gusto yung Eastern Rite, ano? Bawal yung mag-move from one rite to another rite. Ganon din sa Islam, bawal mag-move from Hanafi to Shafi to Maliki to Hanbalit, ano? Bawal yun kasi accepted naman each one, ano? Each one is valid and authoritative and okay, ano? So hindi dapat mag-compare, no comparison. People ngayon, nag-move from one school, one right to another right. It's not a question of convenience, ano? Yung iba kasi convenience, that is not a basis for moving from one right to another right, from one school to another school. Sabi nila, Father, ang consideration petrodollar. Iba naman yan, petrodollar. Ano? Kung convenience, nagbibiro lang ako. No? Yung ba, seryoso sa akin. Kasi petrodollar naman. Magpapagawa ng mosque, magpapagawa ng school. Meron pang sweldo yung teacher. Ano? That is petrodollar. That is Saudi Arabia. No wonder. That's why yung Wahhabi, nagkaroon ng spread not only in the Philippines, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, but nag-spread din yan ng Africa. But that is, sabi nga, nung sa mga nakasakad na tricycle natin, ano yan yung produkto ng oil. Nakita niyo sa tricycle, ano ba sabi noon? Tulo ng langis, ano? Petrodollar, ano? Pag-change nila ng one school to another school is because of the school of thought. O kaya minsan nagkaroon sila ng scholars Dati all our scholars go to Cairo for further training. Now sila nagbibigay ng scholarship during the time of sabihin natin beginning from the great Jamal to the present Egyptian scholarship for Muslims who would like to study in Al-Azhar. Pero ang Saudi Arabia nung silang pera, so started talagang encouraging to go to Saudi Arabia to study Islam, either in Medina or they study in Makkah or they study also in Jeddah. Free everything. Pag-graduate pa, meron pang sustento. Sung ka na sa petrodollar. Kaya na, marami hong Wahhabi. So, yun, ano? So, they move from Shafi to Wahhabi or to Hanafi. So, Hanbali. Normally, that is not allowed. Okay? That is reality. Yun po. Okay po yun? Sagot ko?
Yes, Father, follow-up lang po. Ano po yung most predominant na schools of Islamic law as of today ba?
So, nung panahon kasi ng Caliphate, nung panahon ng Ottoman Empire, napakalaki ng cover ng Ottoman Empire, no? That means the whole Eastern Europe up to sabihin natin sa borders sa Vienna, pati mga Yugoslavia, that's all part of the Ottoman Empire, part of Africa, and the Ottoman adopted the Hanafi school. That means all under the Ottomans followed the Hanafi law. All judges appointed during the time of the Ottoman are schooled from the Hanafi. Okay? Pero nabago naman, nung nag-way na ho yan, nag-rebelde na rin yung Egypt. So, ang Egypt kasi dominant is the Shafi'i, no? So, if you count Indonesia as the majority Muslim, the largest Muslim will be Indonesians. Dagdag mo pa ng Pilipino, saka Malaysia, Philippines, part ng Middle East, that will be the Shafi'i. So, ngayon sabihin mo, the largest, with the collapse of the Ottoman, the biggest now will be the Shafi'i. Okay? The smallest will be the Hanbalit or the Wahhabi. They're the richest. So, Ano ba hong bilangan? Number o yung pera? Ano ba? So, sabi nila, ang bilangan daw yung petrodollars, di ba yung tao, di ba? Maraming kang tao, wala ka man pera, ano magagawa? Di ka magaga. So, samantalang kukunti na handbalit, na wahabi, ang dami na. The biggest oil field is Saudi Arabia, no? So, they have plenty of petrodollars, you see? So, which determines, sabi nga, kanina, nung una, akala ko magde-determine convenience. Ako, that is bad. Pero sabi na, Father, hindi naman lang convenience. Resources, ano? And they have the resources. They can move from one school to another school. Totoo ba yun? Kayo mga judges, kayo mga abogado. Kung kayo sino yung kliyente na merong malaking resources, hindi ba? No? Ay, sorry. Na mahaba PC. Okay ba yun? Tama ho ba yun? O hindi? Ganon din ho sa lahat. Whether canon law o secular law o Islamic law, no? Pare-pareho yan yung resources. Hindi na ho tayo magsabihin ng magano, no? Okay. Tama ho ba? No? Sino ba gusto mag-question?
Thank you, Father.
Wala na.
Okay. Father.
Ha?
Father.
Yes.
Father, I have a question.
Marata.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Thank you, Father. Clarification, Father. Di ba ang community ng Islam ay nahati sa dalawa, no? Yung traditionalist and rationalist.
Isa school
Tapos,
isa interpretation lang ho yan ng law. Okay, so go ahead.
Okay, yung interpretation ng law po. Ito ba ay tama ba yung impression ko, Father, na itong pagkahati-hati nila sa interpretation, yung rationalist ay of course based on reason, traditionalist yung what was handed down by Allah to Prophet Muhammad. Ito bang traditionalist na sinasabi natin dati, ito ba yung masasabi natin ngayon sa modern times na ito sila yung mga fundamentalist? Di ba sila ba itong fundamentalist allied with the Shia tradition? And the other one, yung rationalist allied with the Sunni tradition? Is it safe to have that kind of thought, Father?
Hindi ho, pare-pareho silang Sunni ho no? Una, pare-pareho silang. Ang major division of Islam will be the Sunni and the Shia. Okay, the Shiite, no? Yun ang two major division, two branches of Islam. Within Sunni and within the Shia, meron tayong tinatawag na tama sa mo, traditionalist saka rationalist. Okay? Between the two, meron talagang fundamentalist. Sa Christianity, marami din fundamentalist. Fundamentalism and radical fundamentalism is not monopoly of one religion. Okay? So, merong fundamentalist sa Sunni, meron din fundamentalist doon sa Shia. Meron din sabihin natin na violent extremist doon sa Sunni, meron din ng violent extremist doon sa Shia. At meron din violent extremist din po sa Christianity at sa reality ho yun no? Ng politika. Okay. Ang point lang doon siguro makita ho natin is that number one, na within the Sunni tradition totoo sabi nyo na yung radicals in all religion, including Islam, will build away sa innovation, creativity. They stick to the letter, tradition, tradition, yung letter. Pero iba naman active yung dynamic, yung understanding of tradition. Ito, letter of the tradition. What was handed. Yung talagang literal. Yun yung more of the fundamental. Kaya nga yung mga fundamentalist ngayon, mayroong pangalan ho sila ngayon Ang tawag nila Salaf. Salaf. S-A-L-F. Salaf. Yung Salaf. That means they only accepted yung Medina. They don't accept the Umayyad. They don't accept the Abbasid. They don't accept the Ottoman. They don't accept the contemporary age. They go back. History goes back. Yun yung tradition in the Medinan period. That is this Salaf. So most of those ISIS and those radical, including sabihin natin Al-Qaeda, because si Qutb na kanilang maestro, will be belonging to the Salaf movement, which is the tradition that belong only to the Medina. Okay ho ba yun? Pero that is true also in the Shafi, and that is true also in the Four School, and that is true also in the Shia. Nahati talaga doon no? Yung more of culture of research, culture of rationalist, culture naman ng isa is no movement, You know, talagang kultura ho na yun, no? Ng tao. Kahit ngayon, no, meron gusto nila magmisa pa sa Latin, no? Yung pang Tridentina, no? So, yun. Kultura na ho yun. Wala tayong magawa ho doon talagang. Ano ba dapat gamutin doon? Siyempre, scandal kayo. Pabayaan mo na lang sila. Total, lilipas din yan at they'll be exterminated naturally. Not by COVID-19. Mamatay tayo lang sa umuna pag-aksaya ng panahon. Move forward. Okay. Yes, ano pa ho? Wala na. So,
See you again, Father.
Huh?
Father, excuse me.
Yes, go ahead. Judge.
Father, this is related to our prescribed materials.
Yes.
We received through Viber certain materials courtesy of our classmate, and I think it was Sir Madamba, and we thank him for that. Which of the three would you suggest that we start with to allow us to keep abreast of the discussion? Thank you, Father.
Okay. Use the first one, read is Coulson, The History of Islamic Law by Coulson, N.J. Coulson, okay? The first thing that you should read and part of your library, Coulson, okay? The second book that you need to grasp is the Introduction. Shat is a very good kailang di sa mga Muslim, Orientalist sila. The Introduction to Islamic Law by Joseph Scott, okay? A German, And the third one will be Al-Halak, si Law Muslim ho. Very good also. So Al-Halak. There are good collection in your library so that at least maganda ho kayo. Nakita na, ang ganda pala yung mga libro mo dyan, okay, my library. Marami pa rin akong libro on law, Islamic law. Ako lang siguro may divide this library on Islamic law in the whole Philippines. Pero vertical ho, na mga study, Na, kasi passion ko na ho yun, na pang-research, Okay. So my point only is that importante ho yun, lagay nyo nun. Sa final nyo, you can just write a short essay on any of the three. Okay? One lang ho. Basta present lang ho kayo. So, ang record ko lang ho ngayon kasi mahirap magkuha ng attendance and I was required to give you attendance. Can you mag-email ho kayo doon sa Peace Blackboard. Sabi nyo lang present, para alam ko kung sino yung present. Okay ho ba yun, But yung first and second class natin, present. First class present, second class present. Okay ho ba yun? So,
I took a screenshot.
Yes.
I took a screenshot. I can email it to you po.
Okay. So, as I repeat po, sa first class, sabihin nyo present, second class present, para ma-keep tab ko. Okay. So, in conclusion, I would like to thank each one of you. At maraming salamat. Ang rin ako sa inyong enthusiasm po sa law. So, that's good po. Maraming salamat sa inyo at God bless you. Till ang next class po natin kailan ba? Kailan next class? Ano sabi ni Princess? Ang kailan ba ang ating next class? Nasaan yung aking phone? Nandun Kailan ang ating next class?
October 10, Father.
October 10. Okay.
October 10, Father. October 10.
October 10. Okay ho. Same time at same... Papadala ko lang ho sa inyo. Okay ba, no? Okay naman yun. Okay ho. Kasi yung aking Zoom, walang limit ho yun That is our office So, okay Sige. God bless. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Okay.
Thank you din, Father.
God bless you all.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Father. God bless.
Thank you also. Wow.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father.
Salamat po. Salamat. Okay, I will conclude now. I'll end our conference.